Welcome, everybody. Live here, off the mic wrestling podcast, wrestling show on YouTube. Appreciate y'all tuning in. This was a very interesting episode of AEW Dynamite. I'm going to probably have some polarizing opinions that are not going to agree with a vast part of the AEW audience and even some wrestling fans who enjoyed this show. Listen, I'm just going to cut to the chase right off the bat. MJF Ospreay was awesome. One of the great matches that I can ever recall watching. They worked their butts off for close to 60 minutes. And then the final minute of this match happened. And also, there was some stuff early on that, I'm willing to look past, referees not counting. The referee's discretion was a little bit weird. But the final minute of this match just made no sense whatsoever. It made Will Ospreay look stupid, and it rendered basically the first 59 minutes of this match almost utterly meaningless. All the hard work, all the crazy moves, all the crazy counters, all of this stuff that was put into this match and all the effort. And I'm not dismissing the effort that these two men put out. This was a fantastically worked, fantastically wrestled match. But we get to the finish. Will Ospreay in the final minute is going for the Tiger Driver, a move that he has since denounced doing since the Bryan Danielson match. He has now teased doing it multiple times, and it didn't end up costing him the match against Swerve Strickland at Forbidden Door, but he stops himself from doing this in a match that he had been wrestling for almost an hour and tried just about every single thing possible to do in this match. Every single thing. But you're going to tell me that you don't want to put your opponent away with the move that you've already retired. So if you're not going to do it, why even bring the spot back? Maybe they bring this back at Wembley and he does it to him and that's the finish to the match and that's the story that gets paid off. But why work a 59-minute match and get to 59, 58? You get a ref bump at the end and Ospreay gets hit with the Dynamite Diamond Ring and MJF wins with 2 seconds left. So all of that work to build up to a buzzer-beating finish. I don't understand why you're booking that when you could just wait 4 or 5 weeks and do a banger at Wembley Stadium and just waste the match on free television. That finish just, I could run through every list. I wrote down a whole bunch of spots. There was a bunch of great stuff early on. He's taunting Daniel Garcia, so that builds the story. MJF was so great in this match. Will Ospreay was his usual high-flying self. But like I said, sometimes you're only as good as the finish of the match. And I hated with a passion the finish to this match. Because we're watching this match for close to an hour. You're building it up. And I understand why they put it on first. Initially, I was not okay with that because I was like, it's such a big match. But, okay, as it got longer and longer and longer into the match, you're like, okay, this could be a draw. But then, like I said, that last minute happens. And in my mind, that pretty much renders the first 58, 59 minutes of this match completely pointless. Because you run a finish where Ospreay's going to go for the kill, doesn't do it, and it bites him in the ass. And now your top babyface has taken 2 losses in the span of a month. Again, why did this match need to happen? Because you needed to pop a rating because you were afraid that the Republican National Convention was going to take people away from you? Book better shows. You don't need to rush matches that need longer storylines to build, and you only had really one promo for these guys to build. And they did a really fantastic job for 50 plus minutes building this matchup. But to have that conclusion to it, I honestly would have been better off with, doing the time limit draw. It's been kind of done to death, but that might have been a better, more satisfying conclusion than making Will Ospreay look like a freaking idiot at the end of that match and getting bitten in the ass. I know that they're trying to tell a story that, hey, Don Callis and him not being there, he doesn't have the killer instinct, but it's just you just had this guy put over Swerve Strickland in under 30 at the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Now MJF's beaten him with 2 seconds left in a time limit. And like I said, you're rendering what you told in that entire match meaningless. It's like, What am I supposed to do? Okay, you're going to wrestle 60 minutes of work, and then Ospreay's going to cough it up at the end and fumble the bag. Like, you could try to spin it any way you want. I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. I'm not going to run through all of these spots and like there were Panama Sunrises, Tombstone Pile Drivers, Poison Ranas, just sick moves. And then he doesn't want to do the Tiger Driver. There's a ref bump, and that's it. He gets hit with the Dynamite Diamond Ring, and he loses with 2 seconds left. Like, I don't like this on so many different levels because it's just like you're rendering the work of your top stars so much to being pointless, and then you're making one of your top baby faces, one of your top stars, look like a moron at the end of that match. Do not understand it whatsoever. That was I can't. Like I said, it was a great match, but people saying it's the greatest match in the history of Dynamite and it's one of the greatest things they've ever done, they're full of crap. I'm sorry. Like that finish really pissed me off. It really pissed me off because it's just like I said, it's booking 101. I mean, you could dismiss all the ref nonsense where they weren't counting and poor Bryce Remsburg was just standing around doing nothing when they were fighting in the fans, when a fan's hitting MJF, when they're using tables, when tables really should be DQ. Like, these are basic things. And I understand that it's kind of like an indie mindset, but like, come on, guys. Stop trying to hype this up. This was BS at the end, because like I said, everything that they put into that match in the first part of it, all the way up to the end in the final minute, was rendered useless. It was rendered useless. What am I supposed to think when that's your finish? Okay? End of story. I've been ranting. I've been saying the same crap for about 6 minutes here, but it's just, I had to jump into that right away because I don't want to, I'm going to spare you guys the expense of just running through how amazing this match is. Go back and watch it. And then maybe just shut it off in the last minute. Because like I said, that was so stupid. So dumb. If you were going to do that and just say, okay, we're going to go to Wembley and now do it again in a rematch. I know that Will Ospreay's going to win. So what was the point of this? What was the point? You have him work a banger match on a show on your 250th episode. You have all this work put in, all that stuff going on. You have your top babyface losing the last minute because he was an idiot and wanted to try and do the noble thing. And then you're just going to run this back in his home country at All In a match that was going to be a first time ever match that nobody's ever seen against two of your biggest stars. And we all know what's going to happen. We know what the conclusion is going to be. We know that Will Ospreay is going to win back the international championship from MJF. So again, why did you do this match? So many things wrong with it. I hated the finish. I was willing to see it through. The finish sucked. And then the end game of this whole thing is you're going to do the match again. And MJF's going to lose. So what's the point of this? To just string on a storyline and build heat through a match? You could have built this up to be this dream match if you had these guys just yelling and screaming at each other and build to some sort of big thing. Like involved, like have some teases with the Don Callis family. Do some things there rather than just throw this match on television for no other reason than, hey, I'm trying to pop a rating because I'm scared that we're going to have one of our lowest numbers of the year if we don't do something against the Republican National Convention. Just God, I'm so frustrated because this is the type of nonsense that has been killing AEW for the longest time. Because, like I said, the match itself with MJF and Will Ospreay was great, but then the ending and then where the end game is of all of this, going to Wembley Stadium with these two facing each other, and we know the conclusion. There was no point in this whatsoever. Okay, let's move on. The rest of the show was just a bunch of hot air, to be honest with you. You had a Mark Briscoe and Acclaimed, and basically Swerve and Mark Briscoe agreed to have the Acclaimed join their team. Shocker. I could have told you that from a mile away. I told you last week what this match is going to look like. Chris Jericho gets a promo for TV time. He talks to the crowd about violent crime. Says he's been on the first episode and almost everyone since of Dynamite, and he'll probably never be off one until episode 500. And then he keeps threatening people to listen to the learning tree or people are going to get hurt. References all the people that, including Hook and Shibata and Samoa Joe, who have been knocked out, and says, who could be stupid enough to not listen to the learning tree? And out comes Minoru Suzuki. They'd been hinting at this before Forbidden Door. and he presents them with a letter in his hand. Basically, he says next week, presents the letter to Brian Keith, and it basically says that Keith and Big Bill are banned from ringside for the FTW title match. That's going to be on the Blood and Guts show next week. Suzuki hits a headbutt on Jericho, and then he just sort of waves at him with the "Hi guys." Listen, I like Minoru Suzuki. I think he's a lot of fun for an older guy. He's just the murder grandpa, so it's great. And it's like, you know what? Him and Jericho, it'll be fine. I just think we don't need this much Chris Jericho in our lives in the year of our Lord 2024. It's just I could have done without this segment. I understand why they're doing it because they got to build until Hook comes back, and they're going to probably do Hook and Jericho at Wembley, and something's going to come out of that. Like Jericho getting more darker with this character is okay, but again, like there's no need for this Chris Jericho stuff. Like there's better things for AEW to do and put on their television. Like it's like I said, this is fine, but you don't need to continue to trot out Chris Jericho in front of the audience when nobody wants to see him. Like he's trying to play into this gimmick that nobody likes him and that he can be over the top, but it's just like, hopefully this ends sooner rather than later, but we're going to probably have to wait until All In for Hook to get that title back. Then we get an Elite promo. They threaten to hurt Swerve enough for the title to become vacant. Mercedes Moné comes into the shot, thanks them for banning Britt from backstage, and then Okada whispers to them and asks Mercedes to do the CEO dance. She does it, and then Okada starts like, "Whoo, it's hot in here." I've said this before, and I'll say this again. The Elite in general, the new Elite sucks. Nobody cares about Jack Perry. Nobody cares about the Young Bucks. Hangman's actually really interesting, but he's not really a part of it. He's just kind of like, kind of a mercenary. Kazuchika Okada has been fantastic in this whole thing, but he's a comedy character, and this is supposed to be one of the best wrestlers in the world. So if that's the case with this whole Elite thing, then you're failing this. Like this whole angle, and I'll talk about Blood and Guts a little bit later on, but this just, like, you're having Kazuchika Okada do comedy bits. He's the best wrestler in the world, and okay, and this was funny and all, but and he's low-key been kind of fantastic in this whole role and kind of showed off his personality and stuff, but that shouldn't be the goal of this, and especially when the rest of the group sucks. Kazuchika Okada can't be the best thing as a comedy character. He's got to be the best part of the thing and look like a real star. And when you're presenting him as this joke character who's just joking around, saying bitch, flipping people off, and being like smitten with Mercedes Moné, that's just what are we doing? Then we get to just a really weird match between Mercedes Moné and Nyla Rose. I like both of these women, and I'm not going to engage in the banter with some people in here about Nyla Rose being trans. I think she's a woman. Like, I'll just go with that. I'm not going to go political about this type of stuff. She's a woman. She identifies as a woman. If you're going to come at me about that, you go find somewhere else to yell at. Like, this is just dumb. Like, I am all for women and equality in anything. I talked about this with Rhea Ripley and how she's being presented. Nyla Rose is a woman. So let's end that right there. But anyway, this was a weird match because Nyla is the baby face and Mercedes is the heel in this match. So Nyla spends a large chunk of this match just overpowering Mercedes. Like there was a spot where Nyla tries her stalling suplex. Mercedes tries to spin out and do a suplex of her own. And Nyla says, "What the hell are you doing?" She hangs her on the top rope and gives her the guillotine leg drop, which is always a sick looking move. And that gets a 2 count. We go to break. Mercedes then, near the end of this match, Mercedes hits a top rope bulldog, pulls out a CEO glove, a la Britt Baker with the DMD glove. She tries to go for the lockjaw. She doesn't know how to do it. Nyla bites her. And then Mercedes applies the statement maker, bank statement, for the win. And that's it. Again, this was weird. This was a weirdly booked match. If you're trying to get Mercedes Moné over as a heel, you don't book her with Nyla Rose, who's going to overpower her in the match. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I understand, okay, she laid out a challenge and Nyla is a former women's champion. I get that, but this just felt odd. Like Nyla spent a lot of this match, overpowering Sasha, who's significantly smaller than her, and that's just Sasha's or not, I call her Sasha because I've known Sasha Mercedes for the longest time, But yeah, this just didn't really do it for me. And then I could have told you what happened after this. She goes around in the crowd. There's a sign up where it's because Britt Baker had been banned from the building, had been banned for backstage actually. So they that's how they talked their way around how this whole angle at the end of it worked. So there's a fan holding a sign that says DMD greater than CEO. Mercedes pulls back the sign as somebody in a Sting mask. She rips up the sign, and then Britt reveals herself, attacks her. They kind of have some fisticuffs, and then there's the worst security guards ever just breaking this up. And that's it. That's all we get. First week was great for this feud. The last two have sucked. And more and more, since she got to AEW, I am starting to become crystal clear and saying to myself, did I overrate Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks for the longest time? Because the further I get away from it and the more I see her on AEW, and maybe this is Tony Khan, or maybe this is just that she doesn't have the WWE machine behind her. I get why WWE did not want to sign her. Obviously, she wanted a ton of money, but you look at somebody like Rhea Ripley and the way that she is presented, the way that she carries herself, how young she is, how more she has to grow. You see why WWE is investing a lot of their resources in somebody like her or a Liv Morgan or a Tiffany Stratton or somebody down in NXT like a Roxanne Perez. And you say to yourself, do we really need Sasha Banks or Mercedes Moné? Go get your bag, Mercedes. Go get your money and go over there and do what you got to do. But the further I get away from this, I'm starting to think Mercedes Moné is a little bit overrated. And I know that's going to offend some people, but literally in everything that she has done in AEW, she has been outshined by Willow Nightingale in the build to her match at Double or Nothing. And then the match itself, she won it and nobody really liked it. Then the Stephanie Vaquer match at Forbidden Door, that whole feud, Stephanie outshined her in the match. People didn't like it and they moved on. And then Britt Baker comes out, takes away her shine. They have a great promo segment where Britt comes off really, really well. And it's been really hard to get her over and believable behind fans because she had been a heel for so long and it took her there. And then Britt's this believable babyface, and it took them forever to realize Mercedes is better than a heel. Her promo segments have sucked. And again, the more and more I get away from this thing and the distancing from her being now fully in AEW, especially the way that she was presented from the start, I get why WWE moved on, and she's frankly overrated. She's fine, and she's one of the great women's performers of the generation, but I think the way that we've propped her up on the same level as a Charlotte Flair and a Becky Lynch, I'm starting to see why that even a Rhea Ripley I would take over Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné right now, because it's just like you just see the way that between the booking and obviously having the WWE machine behind, I think Mercedes needs WWE more than she realizes. That's just how I feel. And it's like segments like this, and this was just an odd match to book. Like, it just was weird. We get a Mariah May hype video hyping up her whole beatdown at Toni Storm that was great last week. Then we get a Jack Perry promo where he talks to Darby Allin, basically says, hey, and you beat up Brandon Cutler. You think I give a shit about him? And so he's beating up Brandon Cutler and threatens Darby to come find him. I don't give a crap about Jack Perry. I liked Jungle Boy in the early stages. He was fun. But then the whole nonsense with the heel turn and then the whole thing with CM Punk and now the scapegoat thing, it's just not working for me. It doesn't help that the Young Bucks are with this. It's just like none of this works for me. It's like it's one of the least intimidating authority groups that I can remember. And it's just like I don't care. I just don't care. And this feud, and like I said, when we get to the end of the show, I'll talk about Blood and Guts coming up next week. I'm just not interested in this. I'm going to watch it, and it'll probably be a fun match with a bunch of spots, but it's like those Hell in a Cell matches where near the latter stages of the existence of that pay-per-view, you're just throwing random matches with no heat inside that cell, and how are we supposed to care? So then we get to Mariah May comes out as Toni Storm, which was great. this was a great little bit of booking. Tony Schiavone, I don't know if this was worked in or if this was just like, he doesn't give a shit. He yells, "Come on, speak, bitch." And like, and Excalibur and Taz on commentary were just like, whoa, 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 whoa. So Mariah goes, "Let's be honest, you all saw it coming. Everybody saw it except for Tony Storm." Says Tony just in reality was giving all her spotlight away. The question shouldn't be why, but what took so long. Goes, honestly, I didn't think it would last this long either, but it was so easy, and I was having so much fun stringing her along. I just wanted to see how far it would go. And then she said she saw Wembley. I thought, why take the horse out back and kill it when I could do it in front of as many people as possible, and it could be so much more. And then basically she says to Tony, "Don't worry, I still love you." And that was her greatest performance last week. Mariah says her best performance will be at All In because All Elite Wrestling is now all about Mariah. This was fine. Delivery, okay. And some of the fans just didn't really care. Like I said, because after you put on that match, and I'm not going to speak for people in that arena who maybe they didn't like the finish, but in the latter stages of this show, this crowd was kind of dead. They got woken up at the end with the closing angle, which added some degree of buzz to the Blood and Guts match. Like I said, this Mariah promo was a fine follow-up. It made sense. I'm excited to see the match. I'm excited to see what Toni Storm does when she does return to television. If she is timeless or if she is the old Toni Storm with bits of timeless in her. But I think it would behoove her to be a little bit more serious going into this after she bled profusely last week in that really just great angle between these two women. Then we get to the main event, Swerve Strickland versus Kazuchika Okada. I ask again, like I did in the beginning of this show, why do this match on free television? Especially when we all knew what the finish was. Neither one of these guys could lose. I get it. It's kind of to set up what's happening next week, but these guys are going to be wrestling each other next week. So why do this match between two of your top performers, two of your I don't necessarily would call them top champions because the Continental Championship is kind of a joke, but it's just like if you're Okada, like in your Swerve, it's just like this doesn't do anything for either one of these guys. This was just there, and you could tell by the fans these guys were working their asses off, and the fans just didn't give a shit. They didn't care. I mean, Okada hit a DDT on the floor. They went to break. Swerve hits a headbutt coming out of it, goes up top, but Okada hits his beautiful looking drop kick and knocks Swerve to the apron. Swerve then hit a flatliner and transitions into a suplex for two. Okada hits that dead-eye looking neck breaker for two, hits his top rope elbow drop, and then gets rolled up for two after he does his whole I'm doing my Rainmaker pose, but I'm going to flip you off, which is his heel thing to do. Okada then hits a tombstone, but then out of that, Swerve counters into a Swerve stomp off the ropes. And then the Young Bucks just come in and end it for a DQ. I could have told you this finish was happening from a mile away. I knew this was going to happen. I understand you're trying to bring in viewers, but a lot of people were probably tuned out after that Ospreay MJF match, to be honest with you. Because, yes, you knew Swerve Okada was going to be the main event, but who's going to really stick around for that? Like, it's just how this thing is booked. And it's like, I knew that this was going to happen. Now you could kind of say, okay, they could still do it again. But yeah, there's only one first time ever. So again, why do it? Doesn't make any sense. The closing stuff was fine. I mean, Swerve ends up clearing the ring. Everybody comes running in, all the people involved in the match. But then Hangman's music hits. Swerve's looking at the aisleway. Okada then pulls Swerve to the outside, so Hangman and Swerve don't touch. We'll probably get that moment next week in Blood and Guts. Security then ends up splitting the two groups, and then Darby Allin's music hits, and everybody's standing around for a good minute or so, and Darby comes from the ceiling. I knew this was going to happen. Didn't make it any less cool. This was pretty badass to call back to Sting, his mentor, the guy who he was in his final match for. Darby's crazy enough to do that. Darby being in this match and Mark Briscoe being in this match is fine. They're two crazy enough people to do crazy spots. Swerve it gives it obviously some high profile buzz. But hey, didn't we also just make a high profile world title match? And Bryan Danielson won the Owen Hart Cup. Bryan Danielson, there was no build whatsoever to that world title match at Wembley. I understand they have time, but you couldn't have at least, hinted at that. Swerve's going into this blood and guts match, and okay, he has a match with Okada, who Bryan Danielson has beaten, but Bryan Danielson has also lost to this year. None of that played into this match. There was no mention of Bryan Danielson at all on this show. That's not smart. That's your main event of your biggest show of the year. I understand that you had some bigger matches to attend to, and you spent a lot of time on that MJF Ospreay thing. But if you're trying to build the Wembley, from a storyline perspective, and this is my big problem with this blood and guts match, there's no story to this. There's none. There's absolutely none. The EVPs are evil. Great. Hangman's got problems with Swerve. There's some interlocking storylines into this. This feels thrown together. It feels forced. It's the worst built and the worst field of 10 men in a blood and guts match that I can remember. And I'm not saying that these men as characters and in terms of performers, I think the work will be fine in this match. But the problem is there's no reason to invest in this match from a storyline perspective. There's no stakes. There's nothing on the line. And Bryan Danielson, who is in the main event of your biggest show against your top champion Swerve, you could have had them team together. You could have teased tension there. You could have done anything. I understand why Darby and Mark Briscoe are in this match. And maybe you want to protect Bryan Danielson to a degree because he's nearing the end of his career and he's had neck problems and he's had a whole bunch of injuries throughout his career and you want to protect him. But again, even if you threw Bryan Danielson in this match, it wasn't going to save it. This Young Bucks EVP elite storyline has not worked. It has not worked from the beginning. It has not been sold well. This whole thing sucks. And I'll watch it, but I'm not invested in it nearly as much as I have been in the previous 3 blood and guts matches. This has been a poorly built, put together storyline. And again, there's nothing on the line. Tony Khan, who's a key part of this angle from the start, is nowhere to be seen unless he's smiling, doing terrible backstage segments with Christopher Daniels. And yeah, it's dumb. It's really, really dumb. Okay, one thing I need to address, speaking of dumb, and speaking of Christopher Daniels. So on this show, on AEW Dynamite, they showed a segment from Collision. If you didn't watch Collision, it's okay. Nobody does. But on Collision, Jay White was taken out. If you guys know, he's a trios champion with the Guns. So Juice Robinson fills in for him in a random match that they had. They're using the Freebird rule. And okay. So then out comes Christopher Daniels, and they're just stripped of the titles. So they show the backstage interview. They don't show actually where they were stripped. And they're getting interviewed by Alicia who's MJF's bae at this point, and she's got a job, and Alicia's great. So anyway, she interviews them to ask them, are they going to give up? And they said, we're not going to give these up. And then they effectively get taken away, and we move on. And I guess they're going to have a match with Christian, Nick Wayne, and Killswitch at some later date for the championships. So first of all, the fact that you didn't show why any of this happened is stupid. Secondly, did we not have a storyline last year where MJF and Adam Cole were the Ring of Honor tag team champions? Adam Cole got hurt, and for a few months, MJF had Samoa Joe teaming with him. He was defending him on his own. He wasn't stripped of it at all. But in this case, you stripped them. How does that make any sense? Some people say, oh, it's Ring of Honor. Who cares? Ring of Honor and AEW are both owned by Tony Khan. And some of these storylines weave in, especially when those Ring of Honor titles were on AEW television prominently in the last 2 or 3 months of last year. So don't tell me that this is fine and also don't tell me it's fine when you don't give me any explanation, because a large chunk of your audience is not going to Collision because nobody watches that show. It's on a Saturday night and there's nothing really entertaining on that show to begin with. So If you guys can't tell, I'm really riled up because, like I said, AEW Dynamite 250, there was decent stuff on this show, but also like there's good stuff in spots, a lot of good work and a lot of wrestling matches, but just a lot of weird decision making. Like Swerve Okada, that didn't need to happen. You had a fine 59-minute match and then a bullshit last 60 seconds of this thing with Swerve, with Will Ospreay and MJF. Like in a lot of cases, I would say it was fine, especially given what was billed and advertised for this show. This was really disappointing. And if you're AEW, you've got to be hoping for somewhere close to 800,000. I think this is going to be somewhere in the mid 700s. And if they go below and are kind of flat with where they were, because they haven't hit 700,000 in the last month, if they're below 700,000, that is an awful look and an awful reflection of where this company is going. Because like I said, everybody in AEW will frame, and everybody who covers this will try to frame it as, oh, they booked this massive pay-per-view level card because they're trying to put some good numbers into the final television media rights deal. That could be somewhat true, but let's get real. They were going up against the Republican National Convention. Even if you're not political, that's going to draw people away, especially with Donald Trump being around and especially with everything that happened politically with the assassination attempt over the weekend. You can't tell me that that's not going to affect it. So that's definitely a part of this. But they better be above 700,000. And frankly, in a normal week, they should be closer to 800,000, but I'm willing to give them a break. If they're not above 700,000, that's a huge problem. That is a huge problem. But anyway, hopefully going to do a mailbag tomorrow and talk about some other things about how things are looking towards SummerSlam and see some other stories. I'll put out a tweet on my Twitter at OffTheMic28 and at OT Mike Wrestling. You can follow the show there and follow it on YouTube, the same OT Mike Wrestling. But I'll put out a tweet basically saying, hey, what's on your minds, and kind of throw some questions at me, and I'll try to answer them as best I can here in a mailbag Thursday edition of the show. If I offended you, if I'm an AEW fan, I don't care. I don't. And also, okay, one more, and you know, before I sign off here, I'll call them out by name because I just don't care, because it's these shills. You got people, Drainmaker on Twitter, you know, putting out a tweet saying, oh, MJF Ospreay went 59 minutes and there was only 49 minutes of wrestling on Raw. Can we stop? I went on a rant about this a couple of weeks ago. Can we stop ranting about timed wrestling? If you want to go there and you want to get tribalistic, you know, I'll get tribalistic here. Raw is doing way better in the ratings and in attendance, and they had 10 minutes less wrestling than your top match, which had a bullshit finish. Now, let's leave that out. And you wonder why your company's not doing well. You can't just keep putting on bangers and banger after banger after banger with no story and no build whatsoever, and no interesting characters and no reason for us to give a shit. I'm getting really cursy on this, but with no reason for us to care that you're gonna give us these random things, and then you wonder why your company's not doing well and why there's only 3,000 people in an 18,000 seat building when you could have run MJF Ospreay in front of 50,000 people, which they'll get at Wembley. They'll get 75% of the audience that they got the last time they were at Wembley. But yeah. Anyway, like I said, just really frustrating night. And I was looking for something really bright out of this, but like they said, that MJF match got me heated. And then like seeing like people hyping this up as this MJF Ospreay match is like the greatest thing ever. It's not. It had a BS finish. And then for people to just be like, oh, it was 10 more minutes than the entire wrestling amount of Monday Night Raw. Shut the F up. Shut up. Anyway, like I said, if you AEW fans are mad at me, get my mentions. Go on Twitter, OffTheMic28. I really don't care. I stand on my morals. I stand on the fact that you guys need to do better for your audience. And, you know, either admit who you are or stop trying to act like you're anywhere even close to the level of a WWE. This tribalism BS is done. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon.